After watching this video, you will have a thorough and subtle understanding of why the United States only has two parties. A little spoiler, it's not because of the DNC or Joe Biden or any Jewish conspiracies. It's just hardcore, old-school political science. If anyone should be blamed, it was the founding fathers. But keep in mind, they made the very first real constitution in the world. So it was supposed to be bad. Imagine the first light bulb. But unlike light bulbs, constitutions are hard to change. That gave America a first mover disadvantage because it's stuck with a 200-year-old document. By the way, some people want to switch to a 2,000-year-old one. Imagine that. The first factor for the lack of small parties, the notorious 12th Amendment of 1804. No other country had such a strange way to elect their president. I'm not just talking about the Electoral College, which was bad enough, but more specifically about what would happen if the Electoral College votes got split three-way. You won't believe it until you read the actual text. It sounds batshit crazy. But again, cut the founding fathers some slack because back then empirical political science didn't even exist. It was the Stone Age of democracy. So if the Electoral College is split three ways and no one has a majority, guess what? The Congress, but not the newly elected Congress, but the outgoing Congress, will choose the president for you. Crazy, right? And that's not even the weirdest part. When the Congress makes the choice, not every congressman has a vote. Instead, every state has a vote. So a large state with dozens of congressional seats will have exactly the same weight as a small state with only one seat. What does it mean for the chance of small parties? Mike Bloomberg issued a public letter in 2016 explaining why he gave up on running as a third-party candidate. Well, maybe he was a shitty candidate, but that letter was well written. He understood that the three-way split of the Electoral College would necessarily imply a Republican presidency, because the Republicans have most of the small states. That's why every third-party candidate you see in the field is not serious about winning. Without exception, they're all spoilers. And almost without exception, they're all closet Republicans because the 12th Amendment clearly favors the Republican states in case of a three-way split. You don't believe me? Ask any political science professor you can find. I have to mention this guy again because he's peddling hard on some out-of-nowhere third-party candidates. He was like, there are so many people watching my videos, so the candidate I prefer must have a chance. Really? Guys, just ask him how much money he would bet on his preferred candidate, or any third-party candidates. Nah, these people are totally okay with wasting your votes, but not their own money. The 12th Amendment, of course, only explains why there are no small parties in presidential races. You may be wondering why there are also no small parties in Congress. It must be a deep state conspiracy, right? No, it's not. The first reason, but not the only reason, is America's single-member electoral districts. In contrast, most newer democracies have at least some districts that elect multiple members based on their proportions of votes. Let me show you why they're different. This is the American system. One winner per district. Now tell me, how many seats do you think the Yellow Party would win? 0, right? It's a small party in every single district. Now, what if we remove the district boundaries and make the whole area a district with 4 seats? The jargon for this number is called the district magnitude. So M equals 4. Now, because the Yellow Party has a quarter of the votes, it will probably get one of the 4 seats. That is why in a system with districts like this, small parties have an easier time getting represented. In a system like this one, you either have to be a big party or you have to have a regional stronghold, meaning your voters have to be clustered in a small area. If all you have is a niche ideology with supporters loosely scattered across the country, well, you ain't gonna win shit. I'm sorry. You may be wondering why these countries who also use single-member districts still have a good deal of small parties while the US doesn't. As I said, small parties can still win some single-member districts as long as their voters are geographically concentrated. That's what happens to these other countries. But have you noticed that all these other countries that use single-member districts happen to be what we call parliamentary systems? What the heck does that mean? Well, a parliamentary system is a system in which the chief executive can be fired by the parliament at any time. No need to prove crimes or wrongdoings. As long as the parliament is tired of you, your ass is gone. In parliamentary systems, there's a perk for small regional parties. Even though they will never get the prime minister position, but they may have the power to threaten the prime minister with a no confidence vote. And they may use that power to trade for some policy or even a cabinet position. Because of that, people keep voting for those small parties knowing that they won't be the main governing party anyway. The US is a whole different world. It is the only major democracy that has both a presidential system and a legislature exclusively elected from single-member districts. If a regional party goes through all the trouble and finally gets some seats, it won't have much power over the executive branch. Well, it can bargain over some legislation, but it won't be powerful enough to affect the job security of the president and the cabinet members. That also means they will be barely visible in the news cycles or the social media. The voters will hardly spend their precious time to study these parties. Just ask yourself how much you know about the goddamn Libertarian Party. Who are they anyway? In the US, if a congressional candidate wants voters to quickly learn who they are, they have to share the same party label with a major presidential candidate. It's like an information shortcut. The presidential candidates have so much exposure. It would be crazy if you run for Congress without any organizational association with them. The jargon for it is called the coattail effect. You have to hold on to the big guy's coattail to get dragged into Congress. That's why the two-party dominance in the US presidential elections spill over to the legislative elections and make them also dominated by two parties. It's nobody's fault. It's just a long-term equilibrium from the Constitution. So these are the three main features that make a two-party system in the US inevitable. It's totally natural if you want someone to replace them. I want someone to replace a certain organization in China. It's normal for people to crave something different, but you really need to think about what's the best way to achieve it. It won't happen in the next 20 years. Like, how are you going to mobilize enough support to amend the Constitution? I can tell you, voting for some weirdos who are probably on the Russian payroll is not the way to do it.